Every single team in the NFL has a second year player that they're going to be relying on a lot. And in today's video, we're going to be looking at every single team's most important second year player for the NFC side of the NFL. If you want to see a video about the AFC version of this video, make sure you look on my channel. You'll see that exact video. This is going to be up at the exact same time as that video. So if you like this one, make sure you check out the other video. Make sure you like that one. Make sure you comment and make sure you subscribe. Starting in the NFC East with the Dallas Cowboys, I have Donovan Ezaraku. He's a guy who last year was 6th on the team in total snaps. He had a couple of sacks and 12 quarterback hits to his name. And this is a defense that really has seen a complete overhaul. They got Quinnen Williams last year with a trade, and just up front and throughout the secondary, throughout the defense, they added pass rusher in the draft this year as well. And so Ezaraku is not really the veteran on this team, but he's almost the longest tenured player on this defensive line, along with Osa Odighizuwa. He's one of the guys that's looked at as the reason why in the future they are going to be a better group all around, whether it's getting after the passer or stopping the run. For the New York Giants, it's a pretty obvious one in Jackson Dart. Really, the only talk about Jackson Dart in the preseason and going into the regular season is he needs to be healthier. He made only 12 starts last year. While 2 of those starts he didn't start because Russell Wilson was the incumbent and he just needed to take his spot. There were a few games where Jackson Dart got hurt at the end of the year, and he just needs to not be putting himself in precarious situations. It doesn't just hurt himself anymore. It hurts his entire team. For the Philadelphia Eagles, I have defensive back Andrew Makuba. Now, he played in only 11 games last year, but in 2026, he's really going to be probably the starting safety for this team. The Eagles lost Reed Blankenship in free agency to Houston. He was the guy who played the most snaps out of anybody at the defensive back and safety position. So Makuba is really the next guy up. Philly has done an incredible job at just getting younger players to replace their veterans, and Makuba is hopefully going to be the next one for this franchise to step up once his name is called on. Finishing off with the Washington Commanders, probably another obvious one, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, or better known as Bill. No more Austin Eckler for this team, and really when you look at it, the Washington Commanders have already gotten immense value out of this 7th round pick. He had almost 4.5 yards per carry last year, 8 touchdowns, and over 800 yards on the ground on just 175 carries. The hope is that next year and going forward, Bill is going to be the bell cow for this team. He's going to be the guy getting 1,000+ yards on the ground and helping Jaden Daniels become a better quarterback in the long run as well. For the Chicago Bears, I have Luther Burden. He's a guy who was first on the team among the wide receiver and tight ends in yards after catch. He's a 2nd-round pick out of Missouri. And now that there's no DJ Moore on this team, he's going to be a guy that's really looked at more. There is Colston Loveland. DeAndre Swift does a really good job in the passing game. And this team has options, but Luther Burden is going to be the guy that's looked at as the energy type player. Get the ball to him and let him do his work. And we're going to see a lot of throws, I think, go his way. He only had 60 targets last year. And so the fact that he had 47 receptions, that's pretty good for a rookie in the 2nd round out of Missouri, who I think there were some expectations, but there really wasn't a lot considering who was ahead of him in that receiver room. For the Detroit Lions, I have Tate Ratledge. Now, Detroit had somewhat of a disappointing year by their standards, but one of the bright spots was this guy in the middle of their offensive line. Tate Ratledge, 17 starts in 2025. He was a main piece in helping this Detroit team finish top 10 in yards per attempt on the ground. And while it wasn't great, 18th in sacks allowed, they weren't a team that was just allowing constant pressure on Jared Goff and allowing him to get hit all the time. And again, he was a key piece in making that happen. So going forward, he is again going to be a key piece in keeping Jared Goff healthy, keeping him upright and off the ground, and helping Jahmyr Gibbs get over 1,000 yards on the ground again. A 4th-round rookie for the Green Bay Packers last year, Barron Sorrell, only had a sack and a half and 15 total tackles in 2025. But this team is not going to have Micah Parsons until October. They're also not going to have Rashawn Gary at all next year. So Barron Sorrell is really looked at as one of the guys who needs to step up, needs to have a good training camp and, finish out the offseason and preseason on a high note, because he's going to be somebody that's called on a lot at that defensive end or just defensive line room in general. Offensive lineman Donovan Jackson for the Minnesota Vikings. He made 14 starts in 2025. And really the biggest talking point, I think, for Minnesota and for their offensive line is that they have a new quarterback in Kyler Murray. And this team was 26th in sacks allowed in 2025, a number that definitely needs to get better if not only Kyler Murray wants to be successful, but if this offense wants to be successful and try to at least make a playoff run. The Atlanta Falcons had two really good young pass rushers in 2025. One of them I'm going to highlight is Jalen Walker. 5.5 sacks last year, 36 total tackles after being a first-round pick out of Georgia. Really the biggest deal with the Falcons is that there's uncertainty around James Pierce Jr. There's a chance he's able to come back to the field with no real repercussions from the offseason antics, I guess, is one way to put it. But Jalen Walker is really going to be the guy that's, I guess, having a higher workload in the offseason. He's going to be a guy that's relied on more. And he was kind of the guy coming out of college between him and James Pierce that I think the floor felt higher. He might not have had as much potential as James Pierce Jr., but the floor felt higher for him. And so the hope is that he just continuously gets better. And in the second year, it's going to be his first chance to show that he's gotten better. For the Carolina Panthers, 2025 Offensive Rookie of the Year, Ted McMillan, 70 catches for over 1,000 yards and 7 touchdowns after being a first-round pick out of Arizona last year. Now, McMillan, it's really just, can he be even better? This team did lose Rico Dowdle in free agency, but in terms of the wide receiver room, it's really going to look similar. He's the guy in that room that's going to make this group go, and that's going to help Bryce Young become an even better quarterback than he showed he was last year. And I think last year was the first time that we saw that Bryce Young had a number one receiver to go to. Bryce Young had someone that was somewhat of a security blanket, whether it was, getting them the ball in the intermediate game or just checking up somewhat 50-50 balls. This was just a great selection for Carolina in 2025. And again, the hope is that he gets even better in 2026. Quarterback Tyler Shuck out of Louisville for the New Orleans Saints. Year 2 with Kellen Moore. This is really supposed to be the future of the position for the New Orleans Saints. Yes, there's options in this year's draft, and I think going forward that New Orleans could at least explore in terms of adding to the quarterback room. But for now, Tyler Shuck is the guy. And I think you could really look at New Orleans' season last year and how the NFC South ended up faring. This was a team that could have snuck into the playoffs last year if they really wanted to, if a couple of games went their way. Tyler Shuck, if the next step for him is just making some of those losses into wins, making this a 9 or 10 win team, I think the NFC South is going to be in a pretty similar position as it was last year. A team that wins 9 or 10 games is probably getting this division, and that could very well be New Orleans with, the addition of Jordan Tyson in the draft, with the addition of Travis Etienne in free agency. They've made the team better around Shuck. Now it's time to see if they can actually win the NFC South or at least be more competitive than they were last year. In Tampa Bay, first-round rookie Emeka Egbuka had 60 receptions for over 930 yards and 6 touchdowns. There's no more Mike Evans in this wide receiver room. And Chris Godwin has, I don't want to say lost a step, but he's probably lost his hold as the most consistent receiver on this team. I think now it is Emeka Egbuka. He's probably the best receiver on the team, and he's going to be the guy that is the number one option for Baker Mayfield in this passing game. But even Egbuka last year was somewhat inconsistent, and so that's kind of going to be the next step for him in his year 2. Having those games where even if he's not the star on offense, he's still making plays. He's still having impactful moments, whether it's in his routes or with the ball in his hand. He just needs to get that little bit more consistent, and he's going to be a great receiver in the NFL. For the Arizona Cardinals, I have cornerback Will Johnson. He was a second-round pick out of Michigan last year. It was somewhat surprising that he fell out of the first round due to some leg injury issues that he was suffering in college. He didn't have an interception last year, and Arizona was 24th in total passing yards allowed in 2025. And so I think there's just kind of going to be Arizona's going to do everything they can to seek out somebody who can make an impact on that side of the ball in the passing game. And Will Johnson is probably one of the better guys to stand out, or one of the better options to stand out. He was really productive in college. He's a guy who really, I think, was highly touted by scouts and people in the media last year going into the draft. And so to see him kind of not succeed right away and fall in the draft, it was a little bit surprising. But again, the hope for Arizona and people who are in that building is that Will Johnson takes that next step in year 2 and becomes a reliable cornerback for this team. For the LA Rams, it's a bit difficult to find a second-year player that's going to be really relied on. And I think even in Josiah Stewart's case, even though he's the guy that I'm highlighting here, it's just going to be a rotational piece with Myles Garrett and Byron Young. Braden Fisk is also on this team, so I think there's a really small opportunity size, I think, for Josiah Stewart in 2026, but he's going to be that key rotational piece that keeps Myles Garrett and Byron Young fresh. He already had 3 sacks last year in a somewhat similar role after being a third-round pick out of Michigan. And I think LA, they just have a lot of resources at their disposal to where Stewart's not going to be relied on as a main piece, but again, as a key rotational piece with those main superstar names that can help take this pass rush to the next level. After being a first-round pick out of Georgia, Mykel Williams only played 9 games in 2025. He's one of many players who are returning from injury for San Francisco, and he's kind of the one to highlight because he's the young guy. He's the guy that was supposed to kind of buck the trend of these San Francisco 49ers players going down to injury, but even he was susceptible to injury due to whatever voodoo has stricken the San Francisco 49ers locker room. He's a guy that, with Nick Bosa and with everybody else that's on that defensive line, is supposed to help take it to the next level, is supposed to help get after Sam Darnold, whoever's going to play quarterback for Arizona, and Matthew Stafford. You know, he's the guy that's supposed to take it to the next level, and we haven't gotten to see it yet. So that's kind of the thing to look at in 2026 is whether or not that pick is going to be successful. A guy who finished second in Defensive Rookie of the Year voting in 2025, Nick Emenwari, a second-round pick out of South Carolina. He did more than succeed as a defensive back for the Seattle Seahawks last year. He shot expectations out of the water. He was just a player who was all around the field for Mike McDonald and his defense. He played linebacker, he played defensive back, he played nickel. You know, he just did a lot for this team. And he wasn't just a guy that played everywhere. He played everywhere really, really well. We saw it in the Super Bowl, whether he was in coverage against the run or even getting after the quarterback. You know, this is the piece that Seattle's going to be building their defense around for the future, much like Kyle Hamilton was for the Baltimore Ravens while Mike McDonald was the defensive coordinator there. And Nick Emenwari, I think, is on a very similar path that Hamilton was early in his career. That's going to be it for this video. Make sure you check out my other video going through the AFC teams. Make sure you like, comment, and subscribe to the channel, and I'll see you in the next video.